How we doing today, boys and girls? I'd like to welcome you back to another review here on Iron Wings 3187 with my new intro. Today I wanted to bring you my first firearms comparison video. Now, normally I would be more focused on knife-oriented comment, but with my recent purchase of one of the firearms to be featured in this video, I did a bit of searching on YouTube to try and inform my purchase and found there wasn't really any videos that I could use to compare the two that I own. That kind of struck me as odd due to their similar aesthetics, designs, purposes, size, and weight. The rifles I'm talking about are, of course, as you can read in the title, the Marlin Camp Carbine and the Ruger Mini 14. I think this video is well overdue, so without any further delay, let's go ahead and get down to the brass. I think the hardest part about filming a video like this is deciding where to start. Do I discuss the history behind the rifles, their statistics, the facts behind them? I think I'll try to do both and compare each at the same time. Let's go ahead and start with a timeline. Bill Ruger first released the Mini 14 to the public in 1973. It's a shrunken down and cheaper version of the M14 rifle chambered in .223 Remington and .556 NATO. It fires a 55 grain projectile at around 3,000 feet per second depending on the loading or manufacturer you purchase from. By comparison, the Marlin Camp Carbine was designed as a direct competitor to the Ruger 44 Magnum Deerslayer Carbine, the M1 Carbine, and the Ruger PC9/40, which was released late into the Marlin's production run. It was chambered in 45 ACP or 9mm, and my 9mm rifle can lob a 115 grain projectile at about 13 to 1500 feet per second. These rifles are both considered to be excellent camp or ranch guns for both plinking and hunting smaller game or varmints, with the largest game generally considered to be okay to be hunted with them, like probably a white-tailed deer. That statement does kind of come with a bit of a catch, though, as the Ruger Mini 14 is generally considered to be far more humane and acceptable if shooting at longer distances of 50 to 100 yards with a larger projectile, heavier projectile. The Camp Carbine, though, is generally not recommended as a deer gun outside of maybe 25 to 50 yards as the round starts to lose velocity and drops after about 75. I think next we should probably discuss the mechanics and operating system of both. While both weigh about the same and are of similar length and size, you may have noticed a distinct power gap between these two rifles' chambering. The Mini 14 is chambered in 7.62 by 39 300 Blackout, 5.56, and 2.23 Remington. Mind, those are all different models. They are not just the Mini 14 with interchangeable barrels. It's not something you can swap back and forth between. Meanwhile, the Camp Carbine was only ever chambered in 9mm or 45 ACP. This distinction is mainly due to the rifle's operating system. The Mini 14 uses a long-stroke gas piston, similar to its cousins in the M1 family of military rifles, and is not too dissimilar to the AK-47. This method of operation has long been hailed as fairly reliable and durable in the AK-47 due to the fact that the rifle uses a piston that keeps fouling and hot gases away from the primary receiver and its mechanisms. While this is still the case in the Mini 14, it does suffer from the same issues as its cousins, namely the fact that the operating rod is exposed on the side of the receiver. Regular maintenance is required to clean out the operating rod's guide rails in order to keep it functioning if it gets dusty or dirty like the environment I'm in. This mode of operation and action that manually locks on two rotating locking lugs means the Mini 14 can handle more decently potent cartridges, though it does make takedown a bit more involved than the Marlin Camp Carbine. At times, disassembly and reassembly by those unfamiliar with the Ruger Mini 14 may feel like it requires four hands at once. The operating system also fails to lend itself to a stealthy approach for hunting or home defense. If you try to baby the action to quiet it down when chambering around, you may find the bolt has a habit of snagging on the bolt hold open or failing to feed around into the chamber due to the tip of the bullet snagging on the side of the chamber. Another issue with the Mini 14 is that older rifles than the 580 prefix serial number have a 1 in 7 twist pencil barrel and a bad reputation for slinging lead once the barrel heats up if you are shooting past 100 yards. The Marlin Camp Carbine, by comparison, runs on direct blowback, and it's far simpler in design. Very much resembling its cousin, the Marlin Model 60, there are no gas systems, no pistons, just a big hunk of steel and a powerful spring. In fact, you may notice I struggle a bit with releasing the bolt on this rifle, and that's not for effect or for humor. That's because of my replacing the original Camp Carbine recoil spring with a new aftermarket one, meant to help the rifle handle plus P ammunition better. This is the main reason why the rifles are almost exactly the same size and weight, but the Marlin is only in relatively low pressure pistol rounds. The direct blowback system exclusively uses the mass of the bolt and the resistance of the recoil spring to keep the battery action in battery. Mainly used in small pocket pistols, this makes for an extremely reliable gun, but it also causes a fair share of challenges and negative side effects to boot. To start with, it adds mass to the rifle. To quote Othais from CN Arsenal, if you're familiar with that channel, if you wanted to create a direct blowback in something like 30-06, you would need something like a 30-pound bolt body. Because you need such a heavy mass to caliber ratio in a direct blowback system, they are, as previously mentioned, almost limited exclusively to small caliber rounds like the 9x18 Makarov being considered pretty much the highest power cartridge you can reasonably have in a decently sized 9mm pistol without it being unwieldy like the Hi-Point C9. In a rifle, though, this weight can easily be met by the size of the firearm without sacrificing handling or balancing. It does add an ungainly amount of weight, though, especially when compared side by side to a rifle with like the Mini 14. The Camp Carbine weighs almost exactly the same as the Mini 14, that being almost 8 pounds, and it is largely due to the receiver being milled out of a solid piece of steel bar stock. The bolt itself weighs almost a pound, and the stock is actually fairly overbuilt to handle the recoil of the rifle's operating system. On top of the weight, the operating system has a habit of cracking and splitting the stock due to the use of a plastic recoil buffer that has the tendency to break down and turn to powder in the receiver. About the best thing I can recommend if you do buy one of these rifles is that you go instantly to Midway USA and buy a replacement buffer, as they are fairly cheap at about $19 and will prevent you from further damaging your already irreplaceable rifle since the Marlin is now out of production. Another downside to the direct blowback system is kind of a combination of two issues. The first is just how dirty the action can get. Due to the rifle using a bolt body mass and recoil spring to lock closed, and a bullet firing to operate the action and load the next round, it has a similar problem to the AR-15, that being that excess gas and carbon builds up in the action and gets it extremely dirty fairly quickly. While this is normally not a means of causing malfunctions or issues with the rifle due to the direct blowback using the pressure of the cartridge firing to help in primary extraction, this means it will allow the rifle to continue firing even when completely caked in carbon. It does cause trouble if you're at the range or in competition and move to show the weapon is clear. Due to the previously stated use of gases to help primary extraction, if the magazine is removed and the bolt is pulled back without cleaning, I've noticed that more often than not you will wind up with a cartridge stuck in the chamber and need to drop a cleaning rod down the barrel to clear the chamber. This is mainly caused by the chamber getting dirty, the case sticking, and the extractor by nature of the design not being strong enough to achieve primary extraction on its own in a dirty rifle. The final flaw in the Camp Carbine design is the lower receiver. Before I go any further on this issue, I feel I should explain. The Camp Carbine is extremely easy to disassemble, as the action and the barrel are held on by two screws. Once the action and barrel are removed from the rifle, the lower and upper receiver can be separated by pulling out two pins. If that disassembly sounds very familiar, it's because it's very reminiscent of the AR-15. After the two receiver halves are separated, the bolt and recoil spring assembly can be lifted out of the rifle, similar to the Marlin Model 60. While this disassembly is easy as is the AR-15's, it's also similarly susceptible to the same problem the AR-15 is, that being that the lower receiver is considered the registered firearm portion of the gun. Normally, this wouldn't be an issue as AR-15 receivers are most commonly made of metal, with some recently being made out of polymer and very widely available. In the Camp Carbine, though, the lower receiver is largely made out of plastic, and 30-year-old plastic at that. That means this rifle has the potential to break, become fragile, or easily become damaged due to sun rot, dry rot, or age. Again, in an AR-15, this wouldn't be an issue, as you could go down to the store and easily buy a new lower replacement, depending on which state you're in. With the Marlin, though, no one is making a replacement lower receiver, as they have tried to get as they have to be registered parts with the ATF. You may even think of 3D printing a replacement, but in places like California, that isn't a solution, as it would require you to embed a steel bar into the lower receiver to make it legal. In truth, there really isn't a good solution to this problem at the moment, as Marlin Camp Carbines are a cult firearm at best, and doesn't really have the popularity nor the demand to see the company make or sell new metal lower receivers in the rifle. This all kind of leads you to existing examples today potentially having a finite lifespan. After the operating systems, I think the next topic we should discuss is the rifle's operating costs. To clarify, I kind of mean accessories and ammunition more than anything else. While in range and operation, the Ruger easily comes out on top, I want to say. I think the Marlin has it beat in both disassembly and operation costs. To start with, the Ruger Mini 14 is fairly restricted to factory magazines. While there are third-party companies that manufacture magazines that saves some money, they're largely deemed to be unreliable and more trouble than they're really worth for the price savings. While Ruger factory mags are more reliable, they also cost a small fortune, with some factory 10-round magazines costing upwards of $50 in my area. By comparison, magazines for the Camp Carbine are extremely cheap, with all aftermarket reliable magazines costing about $20 new, and you can easily use Beretta 92 magazines that are available as surplus right now due to the Army no longer using the M92. Then you consider the ammunition. While 5.56 and 2.23 are far more powerful than 9mm or 45 in terms of long range, delivering kinetic energy further out, they also tend to cost almost double what a 9mm does even during the pandemic. And then the final point I'd like to make is the price. For this final point, I kind of have to give it to the Marlin again. While it's discontinued and a lower power cartridge and does have its flaws, the rifle has arguably held its value for over 30 years. The same really can't be said for a Mini 14 bought new back in the 1990s when my model was made, as a similarly used Mini 14 from the era will cost about the same as the Camp Carbine, but since the Mini 14 is still in production, there isn't a reason to rush out and buy a new factory model outside of accuracy, and if you do, it won't hold its value. While you may lose a fourth or a fifth of the value of a Mini 14, you'll never lose money buying a Camp Carbine, as there are very limited amounts of them that were produced, and that amount's never going to grow like the Mini 14 has. So to conclude, which rifle would I say wins and that you should go out and purchase? After thinking and some time at the range, personal practice, and experiences, I would have to say the Mini 14. Despite the negatives listed for both of these rifles, I think it's clearly evident that the Mini 14 has far fewer issues, is a more comfortable rifle to use, and is a better operating system overall when compared side by side with the Marlin Camp Carbine. While some may argue it really isn't a fair matchup since the Camp Carbine is only 9mm and a direct blowback action, I would argue that's exactly what makes it a fair comparison. The Ruger Mini 14, the Ruger 44 Deerslayer, the M1 Carbine, and the Marlin Camp Carbine are all lightweight rifles that serve the purpose of a light rifle for around the camp, hunting, personal defense, and plinking. While the Mini 14, M1 Carbine, and 44 Deerslayer all have locked breeches that allow for a decently powerful cartridge, the Camp Carbine just comes up short because of its operating system being only able to handle lower-powered pistol loads. When you factor in the cost, the weight, the price that are all similar to its locked breech competitors, The Camp Carbine's clearly inferior despite its better magazine options and cheaper ammunition costs. This is brought into even more clarity when you realize the Ruger also has a 9mm carbine similar in design to the Camp Carbine that costs only $600 new in the store for a takedown model. While I love the Camp Carbine and it's one of my favorite rifles, I really don't even think it's a competition to say which rifle is better when it's compared to the Mini 14. With that being said, this has been Iron Wings 3187 and thank you for watching. If you like my content, subscribe and comment down below. Which one of these rifles do you think is better? Or which one would you rather own? Until next time, thank you for watching and Happy New Year's, guys. Remember, you're never alone, and ending things is never the answer. Please call the number at the start of this video if you ever start thinking about self-harm. And thank you.